sea of red, it's time for another Fireside Chat, the official podcast of Flames fans. It's go time.
Well, it's a chilly night here in Calgary, and we have Frost to talk about. As always, I'm Dan alongside Matt. And Matt, I think this week we know what our topic is already. We got a big trade to discuss.
Yeah, ho-hum. Nothing big or anything.
We'll get there. Let's look back at the games that were. The first one for the week, Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals came to play the Flames in the Saddledome. And the Washington Capitals got a 3-1 win in this game against the Flames. Interesting to note here that Barrie and Klapka were in the lineup. Guys that we hadn't seen the lineup in a while. And I thought both looked really good here. What were your overall thoughts of this game?
Thought that the Flames, for a good portion of the game, outplayed the Capitals.
I'd agree.
And he got goalied in this one. Logan Thompson made a number of really good saves. He's only lost 2 games this season for a reason. And, Calgary, if we were playing, insert pretty much any other team here, we probably skate away with a 3-1 win or a 3-2 win. Instead, we're on a 3-1 loss.
Yeah, I don't think that the scoreboard tells the whole story of this one. I thought the Flames looked pretty good going into this one. I thought they played pretty well overall the whole night. It was a good effort, and I think anytime you can keep Alex Ovechkin off the score sheet says a lot as well. But yeah, I think Logan Thompson here, as you mentioned, he's looked really good all season. He has 29 wins to his name this season, 2 shutouts so far. He's doing quite well.
Yeah, it's interesting that I felt for most of this contest that Ovechkin and Strome were not very good, and Strome did get the 1 goal on the 5-on-3, but other than a couple of shots from his wheelhouse, there was not really a lot to see from number 8.
As much as Ovechkin is, still an impact player and still chasing Gretzky's record and all that sort of thing, I really have to say that he's showing his age.
Yes. That's not a bad thing. He's going to be turning 40 in September. It's normal for players to start winding down their career at this stage. The fact that he has as many goals as he does at this point of the season is quite the feat in and of itself. And he's only 17 away, so hopefully he can get it at some point. But I don't think that he'll be in the NHL much beyond next season, if at all.
Yeah, I think if he can get that record this season or next season, I think that's probably it. I think that's what he's sticking around for. Next season is an Olympic year, and we know that he's often been the guy who has been, very vocal about wanting to go to the Olympics and that sort of thing. So I think you'll probably see, him go to the Olympics and then probably call it quits after that.
Yeah, right out the season and call it a day.
That's what I'm thinking too. But yeah, he definitely looked like he's shown his age. And then another player we should note as well was Andrew Mangiapane, former Flame, wearing number 88 for Washington, and again kept off the score sheet, which was nice to see.
Mm-hmm.
You love him, but when he's not here, it's like, all right, we don't like anymore.
Yeah.
So good to see him off score sheet there. The next one was the Calgary Flames and the Anaheim Ducks. This was kind of a weird game for a number of reasons. Calgary goes into this game. Obviously, it was announced just before the game that Andrei Kuzmenko got pulled from the game. He was unable to play, so they had to dress somebody last minute. Then, and we'll talk about why in just a little bit. I think everybody knows by now, but Jacob Pelletier pulled midway through the game in this one. Coronado should have got his first hat trick, but they changed a goal. It's really got to be obvious to change a goal on something like that. That's kind of a dick move, in my opinion. And I would say Klapka's his best game as a Flame. Is the Flames best the Ducks 4-1?
Well, to be fair, that goal, if you actually do see the replay, it is quite clear that Coleman did deflect it. So
I think even Coleman would say, give the kid the goal.
Well, the fact that they didn't actually credit it to Coleman pretty much straight away, it was kind of obvious on the replay, the one particular angle that like the puck did completely change directions. You would have thought that it would have been obvious, but they love you.
Well, and that goal happened in the second period. Like, I'm kind of surprised that, you know, I'm curious what the statute of limitations for changing goals is. It's like, if we haven't seen it all the way through the second and all the way through the 18-minute intermission, I don't know, at some point it's like it should stay the way it is, I think.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it's good to have accuracy in your statistical department, but yeah, just frustrating to see Matt not getting his first career hat trick.
Yeah, he did, however, get 2 goals. He got his 12th and his 13th of the year, one of them an empty netter. He also got the assist on Coleman's 12th goal of the year, and of course Hanley on the board here as well. Adam Klapka getting his first goal of the year, assisted by Postel and Bean. This is the second game in a row, I believe, for Wolf, unless it's his third. I'd have to go back and check, but he at least played both games this week. So we're starting to see him getting those starter minutes as well, which you and I have talked about him needing to do is, you know, get the games, multiple games in a row and show he can be a starter. And I don't think he worked all that hard against Anaheim, but, you know, this was a whole team effort.
Oh, for sure. And it was good to see that the team... You know, like, it is a major distraction to have a player getting scratched right before the game and then another guy during the game, and especially 2 of the locker room favorites. So, you know, like, for them to keep the composure, like, it wouldn't have surprised me if they had, like, fallen off the deep end and lost this game, but their commitment to the details throughout the contest, I thought, was quite impressive by the team.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. You know, especially with a guy like Peltier, who, you know, there's the joke going around that he's Huberdeau's son. Like, you know, for Huberdeau to stay focused and all that, you're right. I think that shows some mental discipline of this team to just keep going and keep focused and, you know, move forward. And it was kind of eerie. Eric Francis tweeted right after the game that Peltier's stall was cleared and even his name was off it already, which had to be kind of weird for those guys to come back and see that.
Yeah. You know, it is a business, though, and, you know, not much you can do on that front. Like, it was a no-brainer of a trade, so, you know, but you do have to give things up to get what you're looking for, too.
We'll talk about the trade in just a little bit, but just for accuracy purposes here, right after this game, it was announced the official trade. The trade was breaking all night between Saravalli and Friedman were reporting it, and it ended up being Andrei Kuzmenko and Jacob Peltier, a second-round pick and a seventh-round pick to the Flyers for Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee, both of whom were then in the lineup the next game. Interesting to see where they slotted in. Joel Farabee slots in on the first line with Kadri and Huberdeau, and Frost on the third line with Sharon Govich Postel as the Flames took on the Red Wings and lost 3-1 to the Red Wings here. I thought both of the new guys looked fine. You know, as good as you can expect. I really liked Farabee especially, but the team just didn't have any finish in this one.
Yeah, I felt that the Flames, by and large, did a good job of limiting the Red Wings' chances in this contest. And realistically, they only scored, like, their 2 goals in the first period were on their only 2 scoring chances of the first period, which is just kind of bad luck. And Calgary, I felt, struggled for the first 2 periods at getting pucks into the danger areas in front of the net, giving Talbot quite the easy night of perimeter shots to face. And they didn't really play well until Kadri scored on the power play, and then it seemed like the team tried too hard to get the equalizer, and unforced errors caused the empty net goal.
Yeah, and I mean, that Kadri goal, you and I were there in the Dome, was pretty amazing to watch. It was quite the sight, and he seemed to go on a bit of a tear after that, but I think in a lot of ways it was too little too late.
Yes. Unfortunate, but not entirely surprising. Detroit has also been on a heater since they fired their coach, and you know, I think they're like 13-3-2 or something like that since McClellan got hired, and their game style is basically the exact same as Washington's. They're just a less talented version of that team. And, you know, Calgary, I felt was able to control the play for most of the night, but they just weren't able to capitalize because there are too many Red Wings in the way.
Yeah, and that was the big thing is Calgary wasn't getting in front of the net as much as they needed to. They were being kept outside. And, I guess one thing that maybe stings a little bit is Cam Talbot is the goaltender who gets the win, former Flames goalie. And surprised to see him still kicking around the league.
No. Well, there are always a few guys like that just bounce around here, there, and everywhere, and it's like, oh, you're still here. Huh.
We talked about James Reimer last week. Maybe Talbot ends up coming back here as the backup next year.
Yep.
And after that week now, the Calgary Flames have played 51 games, and they are sitting second in the Western Conference wildcard spot with 57 points. Colorado at 64 have the first wildcard spot. And right now, Vancouver 56 and Utah at 51 right behind them. So the Flames find themselves in a playoff spot 51 games in. And if we take a look at the Pacific Division standings, the Flames are fourth at 57 with LA at 60, Edmonton at 68, Vegas at 68, Vancouver at 56. That puts Calgary after 51 games at 25, 19, and 7. So Matt, let's jump right into the story of the week. The breaking news during that Anaheim game was the Calgary Flames making a trade with Philadelphia. I can't remember the last time those two teams traded. They're not a usual trade partner for the Flames. But
oh, it's been quite a while. I cannot remember the last time that we specifically dealt with them, but
no, I can't either. It's like, there's
the only notable trade I remember from them was trading Joel Otto there at one point, but
that's kind of what I was thinking too. Yeah, like I don't remember any other trade between those two teams. Yeah, not a usual trade partner for us. Oh, sorry, we did last year. We did a deal with them. We trade our 2024 fifth round and 2024 sixth round for their fourth round. So we have dealt with them recently, and that would have been a Conroy acquisition.
Yeah.
But before
Mitch Wall in 2013 was sent there for Mike Testuide. Tim Ramholt was dumped on there for Green Tree. We got Vandermeer also in 08, and then you have to go back all the way to 2001 to get Dean McCammond on the team. So,
all right, so we were due for a big trade with the Flyers.
Yeah, I think honestly the McCammond trade is pretty much the biggest deal that we ever really did.
Was that the first time or the second time we got McCammond?
The first time.
Okay, because the second time we got him, he then couldn't play because he was ineligible.
No, we got that off of Colorado. I remember that one.
So the deal, if we break it down, is Andrei Kuzmenko, a 28-year-old left winger, and Jacob Peltier, a 23-year-old left winger, both in their final years of their deal. Kuzmenko is a UFA and Peltier an RFA at the end of the year, along with a second round in 2025 and a seventh round pick in 2028 going to the Flyers. In exchange, the Flames get left winger Joel Farabee, who's now playing right wing for the Flames. 24-year-old left winger, $5 million. He's in year 3 of a 6-year deal, and Morgan Frost, a 25-year-old centerman, $2.1 million on RFA at the end of the year, and he's 26. So,
well,
Matt,
I know that last year, after the Kuzmenko and Lindholm trade, that you and I were talking about, the feasibility, especially with how Kuzi played with us, that, keep him high in the lineup this season and, might be able to flip him for a good asset. The Flyers didn't really get that memo of him playing well, but, we still ended up getting the good asset out of the deal anyway.
And I think this is one of those things where timing is everything. I think even 2 weeks before that, we would have had to pay somebody to take Kuzmenko.
No, and if it wasn't for his 5 or 6 games where he actually looked like a first-line player again, that, we would have just basically ate the contract and maybe put him on waivers just to release him like St. Louis did with Saad. And, and if Peltier hadn't bounced back as well, and as much as it's disappointing to lose Peltier, the person, the area that the Flames are by far the strongest organizationally is left wing. And, Peltier, you can pretty much replace him with Andrew Basha and have the same player, specifically. And, the Flames have a whole bunch of other guys that are also coming up through the organization that are also in a similar profile as Peltier. So dealing from an area of strength to address the center position also made a big difference as well.
So overall thought on the deal?
I do not like trading draft picks. I think that, in order to build your team properly, that you need as many draft picks as you can and draft as well as you can, and eventually it will turn around for you. That being said, my reaction to this trade is, well, duh, of course you do it. Because, we gave up a second-round pick and basically 2 fringe players on our team who momentarily were playing well for 2 solid middle 6 forwards that are in the right age group for what we're looking for, including a good center who's actually good at board battles, face-offs, and can score a little bit, and he's decent defensively. So not really seeing, pretty much the entire checklist of everything the Flames needing, other than he's a left-handed shot instead of a right-handed shot, that being Morgan Frost. And to get that for basically a second-round pick and filler, duh.
I love this deal. Yes, you gave up a second, but really, let's take Kuzmenko out of this, because I think that he's just to make salary work in a lot of ways. Peltier, a second and a 7th for 2 NHL roster players. That's fantastic. You're if you can do that, you do that 7 days a week and twice on Sunday if you can make a deal like that. What a fantastic deal. And even Jacob Peltier. You could add him for free at the beginning of the season on waivers if you wanted him. So Craig Conroy getting fantastic value for guys that we weren't sure they'd get value for. And I love Peltier as a person. I think he's a great hockey player. But you've also got to give something to get something. And that's exactly what the Calgary Flames did here.
Well, and you look at Peltier's upside offensively is to be about a 40-point player. And good at both ends of the ice, and to be your good middle 6 winger. Well, Farabee and Frost have had down seasons under Tortorella, which not shocking. And they're already 40-point players that play in the middle 6. So any potential upside that Peltier had, you are literally replacing with somebody who has actualized that potential. And both of those guys have further potential of being possibly 60-point significant contributors to this team if they can sort out their inconsistencies.
Yeah, and I think, both guys are having a down year. I think that that's important to remember here, and that's part of the reason the Flames got them as cheap as they did. But, even if they can't sort out some of those inconsistencies, Matt, I think if you're looking at these guys as middle lineup guys, I think that even with some blemishes and some flaws, they can still be pretty important here.
Yeah, well, you look at a guy like Blake Coleman, for example, and he's not the flashiest player, but he does lots of things well. And Farabee is pretty much the same player, where, fast, intense, gets to the right areas on the ice, is aggressive. He fights more than Coleman does. But, he can score 20 goals. He has in the past. He can be a 50-point player. So more or less, with this trade, just getting Farabee alone, you've more or less been able to fill any potential hole that, as Coleman gets closer to the end of his contract, you have already replacement for that player in-house. And whether you keep Coleman or not beyond that, you already have that level of guy on your team. And that's a very versatile piece to have. And teams that end up doing well in the playoffs have lots of those types of players. You look at Tampa when they had guys like Killorn, and Coleman and and they had 6 or 7 of those types of guys. then they were dominating the East and winning Stanley Cups in that. And Calgary getting more of that type of player never hurts. We even were discussing it on our last show of, using our cap space to potentially target guys with bad contracts that, might fit. And I think you and I both were thinking the 30-plus-ish range, not the 25-ish range, but, Conroy pulled a rabbit out of his hat in getting both the age and the type of player in one deal.
Yeah, when we were hearing it come down, and even if they were able to do Kuzmenko, we were kind of hearing Kuzmenko for Frost. I thought, okay, the Flames are going to have to give something to get that done. And then we heard Farabee, and I'm like, well, again, there's going to be you cannot trade Kuzmenko for those two guys unless, all of a sudden Briere's hit his head on something.
Which, after seeing the trade in the NBA yesterday, that could happen.
And then I heard, picks. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And then we saw Peltier pull off the ice, and you're like, yeah, okay, that still makes sense. But even then, even with the pick here, I love this deal. And this is really, if you think about it, I'd say, Matt, the first deal for the Flames that Conroy's made. Last year, all of his deals were getting a guy out of here and trying to
it was necessary pruning of the roster for players that weren't going to be here one way or the other.
Yeah, and it was, kind of trimming the fat and getting rid of assets that, we couldn't use or guys that didn't want to stay here. And this is, I think, the first deal he's made that's a hockey deal for the Calgary Flames. And I love it. I'm not under any illusion that Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee are going to save this team or anything like that, but they're great depth pieces.
Yeah, in my mind, basically we got another two players in the same vein as guys like Sharangovich, Coleman, Backlund, Zari to an extent. Just high-quality middle six forwards, and all that does is push guys down the lineup where, when Zari returns, you could conceivably put Backlund on your fourth line and have Zari, Frost, Kadri, and Backlund all up the middle and spread the depth all the way through your lineup, so every line you're facing is not very fun to play against. And, all of a sudden, Calgary becomes a little bit of a meat grinder to play against.
For sure, yeah. No, it's... it'll be interesting to see how they do that with Zari coming back, which we'll talk about as well. And, you mentioned not giving up, high picks. The Flames still have a second,
from the Eat Bread trade, sending him to Washington in the first place, we got Colorado's second-round pick in exchange. And in the top 80 or so, the Flames have 2 firsts guaranteed, that second and their third. So regardless, we're going to get 4 really good quality players back through the draft. And, even if you're wanting to replace that second round pick, you could always trade down, like we've seen when we acquired Zari in the first place, of trading down a few spots, getting a third, getting another third, that kind of thing. So, one way or another, you can always backfill if you need to.
Yeah, no, I think any way you slice this, I think there's a far better deal for the Flames than it is for the Flyers. I love that they did it so early because it gives these guys some time to get adjusted here. Actually, one of the things I thought of as well is it gives them guys to get here, get adjusted, then go home for a couple weeks if they want to during the Four Nations face-off, get their stuff, bring it back. It kind of buys these guys some time to get acquainted with Calgary, but they're here for really still a good almost half the season. This is not a deadline deal where these guys are coming in for 4 weeks. These guys are going to be here for a good part of the year to really get acquainted with this team and this city.
Yeah, well, and you saw last year, because it happened the day after 1 year ago from this trade, getting Kuzmenko in the first place, and how he was able to kind of grow with the team as they were going through a transition, and basically the Flames kind of went in on a bit of a run through the end of the season, coming close to actually making the playoffs outright, which if the season had gone on for another month or so, they probably would have with how they were playing. But, if those guys can have the time to settle in with the team and, get a bunch of practices under their belt soon after this upcoming week, they should be right as rain heading into the trade deadline and beyond.
Yeah. And, when I look at this, I think, okay, so if you look at the deal, so the Flames swapped even money, Kuzmenko for Farabee. Peltier was making $900,000. Frost is making $2.1 million. Yes, Farabee is probably a little overpaid, but so is Kuzmenko. And I think the Flames right now doesn't matter because they're willing to take that on at this point as they're not near the cap where you got to be worried about that. What do you think?
Well, and realistically, like if you look at it, both Frost and Farabee are more or less like $4 million players. And okay, Farabee's getting paid $5 million, and Frost will probably be re-signing in the 4-ish range. The cap's also going up like $7 or $8 million next year, and realistically, like this team's still going to have close to $20 million in cap space. Like this whole situation is not going to impact that at all. So, like the Flames will still have all the flexibility in the world to add if they wish to.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think $4 million is, I think it'll be $4 million per year for 3 years or 4 years on Frost. I mean, he's 25. Conroy doesn't want to sign guys long-term, and I get that, and I agree. But I think you probably see Frost in for 3 or 4 years when he re-signs as an RFA this summer.
Yeah, and realistically, like with all of these guys that the Flames have acquired of late that are in that 23 to 25 range, they're basically placeholders unless they prove that they're indispensable. And, because the guys that we've just drafted, like Perek, etc., they need their own time to develop and get into the NHL. So, like, basically, once these guys' contracts are up, you can then, finagle the team a bit, depending on who's pushing for what spots where. Exactly, yeah.
And, I think, Matt, the other thing that's interesting with these guys is there's value there. Like, if they, how can I say it? If these guys get a spot taken for them, or from them, or somebody better comes along, I think that there's still going to be value in trading these guys because of the age.
Well, and realistically, if you are to accept a second-round pick each for either of those guys, I think that would be slightly underpaying on what we would receive. So, like, for like how little the Flames actually gave up in this trade, I feel that, like, we were basically gifted the equivalent of a second-round pick in this deal because of how little I think that the Flames paid to get these two guys.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I love this deal. I can't think of any.
And if either of them bounce back to any degree and like say become like 60-point players, which is not out of the realm of question because anybody playing for Torts, it's hard.
I don't even think they have to be 60-point. Like, I think even if you can get these guys in the mid-30s to 40s, they're going to be, good value for their money.
Yes.
I think as middle six guys, it's hard to expect 60 points.
True, but you never know. And both of those guys have had close-ish to that production-wise with the Flyers in the past. So,
yeah, I would say that they were both higher on the lineup, though, with the Flyers.
True. But we'll see.
If you remember when we brought in Hanifin, I had said I think Hanifin's kind of the heir apparent to Giordano, and I think this might be the case for Backlund. I think they might be bringing in Frost, pay him decent money, and then when Backlund either leaves at the end of next year or retires, I think it might be okay. Now you're the second-line center. You're that guy that it's your spot to lose, and I think they might be kind of looking at that as their way forward.
Like a competition between him and Zari. Hey, whoever wins gets 2C, whoever loses gets 3C, and let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
Which healthy competition between basically two equivalent players is not a bad thing either.
Was Zari supposed to be coming back around either just before or just after the Four Nations face-off? Would you put him back in the lineup as a center or as a winger?
Yes.
Really?
Definitely as a center.
Interesting.
In my mind, the Flames team is better if Kevin Rooney is not in the lineup. And if you can put all four of those guys up the middle, Zari, Frost, Kadri, and Backlund, and rotate them into whichever spot you feel necessary depending on the game, and you get Kevin Rooney out of the lineup, you will make your team better by the difference between Rooney and any of those people.
What if you send Rooney down and keep Bishop in that spot?
Same thing. Like, Bishop's fairly replaceable too. Like, honestly, I wouldn't mind getting rid of him back to the A too. Like,
I think he'll go back to the A sooner rather than later. But I'm kind of thinking, like, Rooney, I think, is okay enough on the fourth line with some better centers like Frost coming in. I would really love to see a line of Farabee, Frost, and Pospisil together. And then Farabee, Frost, and Zari as well.
Yeah, you could do it that way. How would you say, over the last couple of weeks, the Flames have been scored on late in periods due to the fourth line being out there. And I feel that losing guys like Kirkland has really damaged that fourth line, and none of the replacements have, up until Klapka, frankly, the last couple of games, has not really played at a level that, the guys earlier this season did. And so I feel like if we can start pushing players down and out of the lineup, I think that would be better overall for the team.
Yeah,
especially because you can rotate four lines that are effective.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know. I think Zari was supposed to be a temporary guy, and it's like now we've got our center. I think, just like Sharon Govich, I think it's not ideal. I guess we'll see where they place him.
Yeah.
So, interesting note here. I have the full trade tree now on the Elias Lindholm deal. You ready to hear it?
It's very lopsided in one way. Let me figure out which team is getting the benefits.
The Flames gave up Elias Lindholm, Jacob Pelletier, a second and a seventh. We won't put Kuzmenko in here because he's net positive. They both gained him and got rid of him. And in return, they have Morgan Frost, Joel Farabee, Matvei Gridin, which is their first-round pick this past year, Luke Misa, Hunter Brzustevich, Eric Jameson, and Yoni Yermo.
Yeah, so you have Brzustevich, who's doing pretty good, Misa, who's doing really good, Gradin, who's also doing very good, and two players that are both doing better than Lindholm. Yeah, that's not bad. Tiny bit of business.
That's amazing to me that they're able to get, I'm just looking at this list and some of the points for these guys. Like, this is amazing to me that they're able to get this much out of it.
Yeah, like, it's quite ridiculous, actually.
And do I think any of these guys they got will be star players? Not necessarily,
no.
But I don't think they need them to be. And I think, honestly, and you and I have had this discussion, Lindholm, by the time he left, was not a star either. I still think Lindholm got propped up by Johnny and Matthew.
Well, and you look at Lindholm this season, he has 9 goals and 19 assists for 28 points. Frost by himself has 11 goals and 14 assists for 25 points. And Farabee, I think, has 22. So, even just looking at offensive output, he has 19. 8 goals, 11 assists for 19 points. So, you're looking at more or less getting two guys that are basically producing at the same rate that Lindholm is for Lindholm and, a second round pick, let alone, the first rounder and. Yeah,
I think Gradin will be an NHLer. I don't know.
Yes, he's really tearing it up in juniors as well.
Yeah, and Brzustevich, I think, will be an NHLer for sure. I don't know about Misa. I don't know about Jameson. But, even if they're good AHLers, like right in the guys we've talked about, you've already got your value there.
Yes. Even if you just cut it at the Frost and Farabee, I think that's a fair trade just between the 4 pieces that we gave up and the 2 that we got back, let alone the first round pick and all the other.
Yeah, so you're kind of saying if you look at it as being Peltier, Lindholm, and a first, a second, and a 7th for Gridin.
Well, not even the first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So those 2 for Gridin. So it'd be Lindholm, Peltier, the 2nd, the 7th for Gridin, Brstavich, Frost, and Farabee.
Yeah.
Yeah, that by itself seems like a good deal for the Flames too.
Yeah, let alone everything else. So
and
Brstavich has been playing really well on the farm too.
Oh yeah,
and like Conroy, I have to give him full props. Like, he is doing a damn good job. And
he is.
Realistically, if I'm looking at what the work he has to do between now and the trade deadline, what I would be doing is trying to kick tires to see if he couldn't get another forward of some sort in that same vein. Because why not?
I think at this point, if you're going to go out and acquire, you got to acquire a defenseman.
And I was about to say, get a D-man or 2, also in the same vein. Even if you have to utilize some draft picks, if you can get guys that are in that 23 to 25 range or so, and you can get quality like middle pairing or lower D-men, I think that's not a bad thing to do.
I think
either.
as a GM, you're out of assets to go get the same type of guy, the mid-20s guy. I think if he's going to get a defenseman, it's going to be somebody who needs to move some money, and I think it'll be a 30-plus guy who is going to be okay for this year, and even if you got to keep him for next year, it's solid defenseman.
Yeah. Well, no, and of course, I think realistically, getting the role is better. Much like we were saying last week of just targeting that middle 6 guy under the assumption that they'd be 30 plus. Like, if that's what you can get, sure. But, might as well swing for the fences a bit and see if teams are willing to offload depth parts of their team for whatever reason, and see if you can't slot them in to get some upgrades that might be able to last for a couple of years too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
priority 1, then priority 2 if priority 1 doesn't materialize.
Yeah, I just think that you've used what you have for assets. I don't think at this point, I know we've talked about it in the past, but I don't think that you're going to get much for Vladar at this point, if anything. I think you run him till the end of the year because he's not looking great. So I think you're out of assets, and I don't want them trading all their picks either. Like, I would, if I were them, I'd say we've done our hockey trade. Unless someone falls into your lap, which I don't see it doing, you've made your hockey trade for the year.
Yeah, and I would still keep kicking tires in that. Like, even if you had to trade a prospect or 2, depending on who, it might make sense, but there at least is some flexibility there. And like looking at what Vancouver did with the trading the first that they got for JT Miller to get a top 4 defenseman, I don't think that was the right top 4 defenseman to get, but the theory of getting somebody like that for Vancouver was a good idea. So if Calgary could do that without utilizing a first-round pick, I think that would be also good.
Yeah, but we don't have the asset to give up to get that.
True.
Right? Like, unless you're willing to give up, Perek, you're not getting a top 4 defenseman.
Probably not.
Right? So that's kind of what I mean. Like, I think the Flames are out of assets. I think they gave away an asset I didn't think they'd give away in Peltier, but I can't see another guy on the roster that you would move to bring in that young defenseman. Like, unless you're willing to move your firsts or take another piece off the roster. And
well,
I don't know
the way I look at it is, how Toronto traded Liljegren, for example, or trades along that route. If it makes sense, I'm not opposed to.
Sure, I mean, but I don't even think we have to say that. You're never going to say a deal makes sense. No, please don't give it to me, right? Of course, if a deal makes sense, you take it. But when I look at what would logically make sense, I can't see what piece it would take to get a 25-year-old top 4.
call the Dallas Mavericks general manager.
And this goes to a report that came out this week from Elliot Friedman that the Calgary Flames have been telling teams that they're not interested in moving Anderson, Kadri, or Uyghur. So with those three names off the board, there's not a lot of assets you can give up to get that top four defenseman.
No, and realistically, with the Flames still lurking in the shadows of a playoff spot, just because they're doing well this year does not necessarily mean they're going to be better next year or the same even next year.
Nor do they need to.
No, and it's one of those things that, like with Anderson, there is still 82 games to be played between now and the next trade deadline type of thing. So, just because you're not wanting to trade him now doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to trade him this time next year. But I think that in fairness to how things have progressed this year, it does make a lot more sense to try and lock Anderson up long term and, build through the draft to fill all the ancillary pieces, like getting guys like Parekh into the lineup and, build it from there.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm just I'm entertaining your idea of a top four, and I'm looking, if those three pieces are off the board, who could you move? I think the only thing you'd have is Backlund or Coleman then.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think they want to, you're already struggling with centers. You're not going to take another one out of the lineup.
No.
And I don't think they want to move Coleman, so you're kind of out of stuff to move.
True.
I still think they can get a top four, but I think you have to wait till deadline day to pick up somebody's, leftovers as they're trying to make cap numbers work. Yep. And even when I say top four for this year, not a top four on a playoff team, but I think, better than our collection of Bean, Miromanov, Pakal, Hanley.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess we'll see, but I think they've shot their shot, as the kids say, and they did everything they could with the players they've got. Postel, I don't think gets you anything. Sharon Govich, you're not going to move at this point, not with a new deal coming up. Lomberg, nobody's giving anything for. Klapka's not going to get you much.
I actually disagree on Pospisil. I think that you could get that top four defenseman for Pospisil because for whatever reasons, teams valued that type of greasy player grinder guy. I'm sure if somebody wanted Matt Rempe, the Rangers' asking price would probably be a first-round pick plus. And I think Pospisil would probably garner that same thing just because of his overall, those guys always go for more than you would think.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting a first for him, though. I think we overvalue him a little bit. I think he's a good pest, but I don't know that he's a proven enough pest, especially when he struggled at the beginning of the year.
That's true.
But we'll never know. You and I are not the GM. So, overall, really excited to see how these guys integrate. I'm expecting some struggles up until the Four Nations Cup with these guys as they finish out the 4 games this week, just because it's going to take time for them to get adjusted to Calgary, get adjusted to the Canadian, market, get adjusted to new players. And for both these guys, their first professional trade, so that's going to take some time to adjust to. If any fans are looking for them, Joel Farabee still wearing 86, and Morgan Frost has moved to number 16 for the Flames.
Yes, Flames legend Rory Kearns has switched from 86 to number 6 out of deference for Farabee.
And for all, he probably was not asked, he was told.
Probably.
He's not even on the roster right now. He's gone back to the AHL to play in the All-Star game. Who knows if he will be back or not. But, I think I always look at the number you're assigned says something too. And to go from 86 to 6, I think says they plan to keep Kearns around either in the NHL or AHL for a while. Otherwise, you just would have given him some other random tryout number.
Yeah, much like Peltier going from 49 to 22.
Yeah. Kearns didn't pick that number. He was assigned it. Just like even Zari assigned 47, Possible assigned 76. They've kept it, but they were assigned those in training camp. He's got number 6. That might be an option too, is to, bring Kearns back up and send Rooney down.
Yeah, I think that the sooner that the Flames can remove Rooney and guys like Bishop from the lineup, the better. It's hard, when the fourth line is struggling so badly because it puts pressure on all the other lines. Because like Kadri played over 21 minutes yesterday, which that's never good to see. Unless you're the Edmonton Oilers putting McDavid out there for 27 minutes. It's never a good idea to put your guys out that long over the course of the season. And, you basically want your first line guys to be playing in the 18 to 20 minute range. And, your fourth line is struggling so much, you can't have them out there. And it just makes the work harder for everybody else.
Yeah, and at the same time, I totally agree with you. This is a rebuilding team, and they're going to have warts. And if you've got to stick with Rooney to get through the next 30 games, I think you stick with Rooney and you figure it out in the offseason.
True.
I'm not willing to move an asset. Maybe you are, but I'm not willing to move an asset to solve that problem right now.
No, but I think we could do that internally anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you've also, though, got to look at where do you want Peltier. And that's another. I mean, they're full of wingers right now. So someone's going to have to come out of the lineup either way.
Yep.
Do you think Adam Klapka sticks around?
I would not be surprised. The reason being is that he is basically Pospisil light in terms of the agitator mode.
I think that Anaheim game was his best game he's ever played as a Flame.
Yes, and the fact that he has that kind of game in him, it's like, let's see more assertiveness from you. And can you do this on a consistent basis? And, if he can learn how to drive the net, like he is the biggest guy in the NHL. So like he's not really going to get pushed off the puck easily by anybody. So if he just wants to take himself to the front of the net, nobody's going to stop him. So, and if he can learn that assertiveness in his game, like he can become quite the wrecking ball himself.
Yeah. And I think too, based on what we've seen, he reminds me sort of like Coronado last year, where every time he came up, he looked a little more complete. And from the Adam Klapka we're seeing now, and the last time he was up there, he's looking like more than just the big body. He's looking like he's figuring out the complete game.
Yes, and like when I at the beginning of the season made my predictions of like Klapka being really good this year for this team, I was kind of envisioning like this kind of growth in him. So hopefully he can keep this up for the balance of the season and become a full-time NHLer.
Now's the time to do it if he's going to do it.
Yep.
I think that pretty much wraps up the Flames for this week. Two notes here that I want to make before we get to our predictions is some awards for Flames players. Dustin Wolf was named the Rookie of the Month for January in the NHL, and Zane Parekh named the Defenseman of the Month for January in the OHL. Parekh had a heck of a month. For a defenseman, he recorded 11 goals and 10 assists for 21 points in 1 month, while getting a plus-minus rating of plus 14 over 10 games.
When's the last time you've heard of a defenseman scoring 2 hat-tricks in 1 month?
I can't think of any. Matt, you love to convert defensemen to forwards. Should we expect this guy to take somebody's forward spot next year?
Whoa, easy there, bud. Don't rush things. He's actually good on defense.
Well, he's good on the blue line. He's not good at defense.
True, but he is getting better at the how to play defense part of it as well. So apparently his game has rounded out quite a bit since this past offseason. So hopefully he keeps progressing on that front too.
And another note is Jacob Battaglia, another Flames prospect. It looks like had a really good month for the OHL as well. So good to see both those guys progressing there. And I'm really excited to see Parekh. I still don't think he'll be a Flame next year, but I'm really excited to see him in the Saddledome.
No, I think that at most you'll see like the 9-game stint. I don't think that unless he blows the doors off, that I think he'll end up going back to junior for 1 more year.
Yeah, he's 19 next year, so he's not quite eligible for the AHL either. So yeah, I think he'll probably go junior, and even the year after that, I think he'll probably be playing with the Wranglers for a bit. this guy, I think, has a bit of a journey to the NHL as he learns how to actually be a defenseman.
Yeah. But, the upside of him being like a Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar type player is there. So he just has a little bit more work to do on the defensive side of the coin. And it's not like either of those guys are exceptional defensively themselves. Makar is better than Hughes at it, but, he's not a shutdown guy himself by any measure.
And I don't think there's any need to rush Parekh to the NHL.
No.
I know I've mentioned this a number of times over the years in the show. I think that Sam Bennett could have been better served by some AHL time. Like, I think you at some point need to let these guys, especially when you're rebuilding, you need to let these guys do what's best for them. And right now, I think the best thing for Parekh is, slow and steady. And I think that's going to include some AHL time. So Matt, let's look ahead to predictions then. If we're done for the week. Last week I thought we'd win all three. Obviously I was wrong. You thought we'd beat Anaheim and Detroit, lose to Washington. Obviously you were also
you get
wrong.
the moral victory of the fact that the Flames looked like they were the better team in all three games. They just didn't come out on the right side of the scoreboard in two of them.
You can't go 82 games looking better and then expect to hoist Lord Stanley's mug. You got to find a way to finish.
True, but every team goes through that where they just get beat in certain ways where like they're doing virtually everything right. Like the Detroit game, I felt that like in the first two periods, Detroit only had 2 scoring chances, and those were the 2 goals. Games like that do happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you're right. They're doing well, and that's all you can ask for. And we've said that for a while too. Is you can just ask them to play the right way, and the wins will come.
Mm-hmm.
So they're in a playoff spot as of right now. As you and I record this, we are less than half hour away from the start of their second game of a back-to-back. They make a quick road trip to Seattle to take on the Kraken. That's a 7 p.m. start time. Then they're back at the Saddledome for 3 more games, and these are the last 4 games this week before the break for the Four Nations Cup, or face-off, or whatever we're calling this thing. And then on Tuesday, the Toronto Maple Leafs come to town, a 7 p.m. start time. Then Thursday, the Colorado Avalanche come to town, a 7 p.m. start time. And obviously Saturday, the last game, Hockey Night in Canada, they're going to be playing late because 2 Western teams, and that'll be Calgary and Seattle again. So 4 games in the docket. What are you thinking?
I think it'll be a bit of a struggle this week for the Flames, and I think that they only beat Seattle here at the end of the week. I think they lose the first 3, and then win the Seattle game.
So you think they lose to Seattle tonight on the back-to-back, they lose to Toronto, and they lose to Colorado?
Yeah. I think all of the games will be close. I just think that the little bit of disruption from the trade might get everybody a little bit off the same page, and they might struggle a little bit because of it.
In some ways, I think send these guys on the road right after a trade for 1 game could be useful, because I think it forces them to be in the plane and, get to know each other and that sort of thing. So I think this 1 game could be helpful. Where do you play Vladar this week? Obviously, you're playing him in the back-to-back against Seattle. That's already been announced.
Yeah, and I think Wolf the rest of the way.
This is a tough week for me to predict.
I agree. That was not an easy thing to come up with.
If it wasn't for the back-to-back, I would say that they sandwich wins and they take Seattle on both ends. But with the back-to-back, no team does well on back-to-back. So I think they lose I don't know. They've also, like you said earlier, they look so good. A win's got to come. Like, if they keep playing like that, a win's got to come. I also think to myself, did they really expend all that much energy last night against Detroit where they can't play on the back-to-back? Like, they didn't look great last night. How much energy did we expend there? All right, I'm going to say that they win against Colorado, because I think Colorado's going to be a bit of an interesting team for the next little bit after having some disruption there as well. And I think they win Seattle at home. And I'm going to say they lose Seattle on the road and Toronto.
So beat Colorado and Seattle.
Yeah, so they'll beat Colorado and Seattle on the back 2 games. Essentially, they'll lose the first 2. They'll win the second 2. And I think then, going into the I mean, we don't know if Uyghur's going to this tournament yet or not, this Four Nations face-off, but right now having one guy going in, I think if you can put in a hard week, and if I were Husk, I'd be saying, guys, put in the effort, you're going to get 2 weeks off here. Everybody except for one of you is going to get 2 weeks off. So, go balls to the wall and then go to Mexico.
Yep.
And I think, like you said, I think you play Vladar. I want to give 2 different looks Seattle, so I wouldn't play Vladar in both. I think you play Vladar in the Sunday game, and then you play Wolf the other 3. Even if he doesn't look good, I think you still give him that, like they gave
runway.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first week I can remember where Wolves played every game this week. All 3 of them since our last predictions. Like, I think you've got to start giving Wolf starter loads.
Yep, and he's doing well. Like, only 1 goal out of this entire week was kind of on the not so good side, and that was the second goal to Detroit. And that's with facing like 100 shots between the 3 games, and you're only giving up 1 bad goal. That's not too bad.
Yeah, there's gonna be good games, there's gonna be bad games, like any player that you're developing. You've got to run with that, right? He can't look good every game. He can't, look good for every start he's in, but you've got to let him have those chances to bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Matt. Well, we will talk to you after this week as we head into the Four Nations face-off.
And as always, go Flames, go.
Fireside Chat is hosted by Dan Stevenson, co-hosted by Matt DeBorg. This episode produced and edited by Peter Marino. Fireside Chat is licensed under Creative Commons license. For full license details, visit firesidechat.ca.